The planet Tyrius 4 was a hunter's paradise, a world where the skies burned crimson at dusk, and an alien jungle teemed with life so vibrant it seemed alive. Beneath the twisted canopy of translucent trees, the air shimmered with spores that glowed faintly, casting an eerie light across the forest floor. This was the domain of the Varash, apex predators known for their six-limbed frames and chitinous armor that reflected the colors around them like a living mirror. Taran Holt crouched low behind a thick vine, his heart pounding as he clutched his pulse scanner. He wasn't supposed to be here. The science vessel Ecliptica had strict orders. Observe Tyrius 4 from orbit, document its ecosystem, and avoid interference at all costs. But when the faint distress beacon reached his comms, a signal of intelligent life, Taran ignored protocol. The signal had led him here, deep into the jungle. His scanner pinged softly, indicating movement ahead. Taran adjusted the settings, and the display highlighted a group of creatures huddled beneath the roots of a massive, glowing tree. He couldn't believe his eyes. They were called Avari, small, sentient beings covered in scales that shimmered like sunlight on water. Despite their delicate size, they were known for their intelligence and tight-knit social structures. Now, three younglings shivered beneath the tree roots, their soft chirps barely audible over the hum of the jungle. Taran's relief was short-lived. A shadow moved in the underbrush, a predator stalking its prey. The Varash emerged, its carapace glinting in the bioluminescent light. Standing nearly 7 feet tall on its hind legs, its other four limbs bristled with claws sharp enough to slice through metal. Its eyeless head swayed as it sniffed the air, its sensitive antennae quivering. Taran's breath caught in his throat. He reached for his comms to call for backup, but froze when the predator's head snapped toward him. It had sensed him. The Avari younglings whimpered, their scales dull with fear. The Varash advanced, its claws clicking against the forest floor. Taran knew he had only seconds to act. Gripping a fallen branch, he stepped into the clearing. "Hey," he shouted, his voice shaking but loud. "You want a fight? Come and get me." The Varash paused, tilting its head as if assessing this strange, unarmed creature. Then, with a guttural snarl, it charged. The Varash lunged, its four claws slashing through the thick jungle air with deadly precision. Taran barely managed to dive out of the way, the predator's claws raking the ground where he had stood moments before. He scrambled to his feet, gripping the branch like a lifeline, though he knew it was no match for the creature's armor. The Avari younglings chirped in terror, huddling closer together beneath the glowing roots. Taran spared them a glance, his resolve hardening. "Stay put," he shouted, hoping they understood the urgency in his voice. The Varash turned its attention back to him, antennae twitching as it tracked his movements. Its carapace shimmered, blending into the dappled light filtering through the jungle canopy. It moved with eerie grace, circling Taran like a predator savoring its victory. "Think, Taran, think," he muttered under his breath, his mind racing. The jungle was full of dangers, but maybe he could use that to his advantage. The predator struck again, its claws slicing through the air. Taran ducked, swinging the branch with all his strength. The wood cracked against the Varash's armored side, shattering into useless splinters. The creature didn't even flinch. "You've got to be kidding me," Taran groaned, stumbling backward. The Varash reared up, its clawed limbs spread wide as it prepared for a final lethal strike. Taran's pulse scanner buzzed at his side, and an idea struck him. Desperate, he yanked it free and slammed it against a nearby tree. The device emitted a high-pitched whine, and the predator recoiled, its antennae flailing. The noise disrupted the jungle's eerie harmony, sending smaller creatures scattering into the shadows. Taran didn't hesitate. He grabbed a jagged stone from the ground and hurled it at the Varash. The rock bounced off its armored head, but it bought him precious seconds. "Come on, you oversized beetle," Taran shouted, his voice hoarse. He waved his arms, keeping the predator's focus on him. Behind him, the Avari younglings seemed to understand. They darted from their hiding place. their tiny legs carrying them toward the denser part of the jungle. Taran caught the movement out of the corner of his eye and felt a flicker of hope. The Varkash snarled, realizing its prey was escaping. It lunged forward, but Taran stepped into its path, arms wide. "Not so fast," he barked. The predator hesitated, its eyeless head tilting as though puzzled by this strange, unrelenting human. Taran's legs trembled as he faced the Varkesh, its towering form casting a long shadow in the dim light of the jungle. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he held his ground, gripping a jagged stone in one hand and the now useless scanner in the other. The Avari younglings had vanished into the dense underbrush, their shimmering scales barely visible in the bioluminescent glow. They were safe, for now. But the predator wasn't giving up. It lowered itself onto its 6 limbs, its carapace shifting colors to blend seamlessly with its surroundings. Taran gritted his teeth. "Come on then, let's finish this." The Varkash charged. Taran ducked, diving into a thicket of glowing vines. The predator's claws sliced through the air inches from his head, cutting cleanly through the foliage. Rolling to his feet, he spotted a thick, dangling vine with spiked pods hanging overhead. An idea sparked. The Varkash growled low, stalking him through the underbrush. Its shimmering body flickered, momentarily blending with the vibrant foliage, making it nearly impossible to track. Taran kept moving, stumbling over roots and vines as he reached for one of the spiked pods. He tore it free, its surface oozing a sticky, iridescent liquid. "I hope this works," he muttered, gripping the pod like a grenade. The Varkash pounced, all 6 limbs springing forward in unison. Taran hurled the pod with every ounce of strength he had left. It hit the predator square in the chest, bursting in a spray of luminous liquid. The effect was immediate. The liquid hardened on contact, spreading rapidly across the Varkash's chitinous armor. The creature roared, thrashing as its movements slowed, the sticky substance pinning its limbs together. Taran didn't wait to see if it would break free. He turned and bolted deeper into the jungle, adrenaline fueling his every step. Behind him, the Varkash let out an ear-splitting shriek, but the sound was cut short by a low, rumbling growl. Taran skidded to a halt, turning toward the noise. From the shadows, a massive figure emerged, another predator, larger and more terrifying than the Varkash. Its body was covered in jagged, moss-covered scales, and its glowing yellow eyes locked onto the trapped Varkash. Taran froze, his breath catching in his throat. The jungle wasn't just full of predators. It was a battlefield, and he had just thrown himself into the middle of it. The larger creature lunged at the Varkash, its jaws clamping down with brutal efficiency. Taran took the opportunity to slip away, his mind racing. He had saved the Avari, but the jungle had turned its attention to him. Taran stumbled through the dense underbrush, each step a desperate effort to put as much distance as possible between him and the chaotic battle he'd left behind. The roar of the larger predator echoed through the jungle, shaking the ground beneath his feet. Tyrius 4 wasn't just alive, it was a relentless, unforgiving force. He pressed on, scanning his surroundings for any sign of the Avari younglings. The trail of broken branches and faint glowing footprints they had left behind grew harder to follow as the bioluminescent plants dimmed, their light waning with the rising of the planet's twin moons. Finally, Taran spotted movement ahead, a flash of shimmering scales darting into a narrow crevice between 2 towering rocks. Relief surged through him. "There you are," he whispered, staggering toward the outcrop. The younglings huddled in the narrow space, their wide, reflective eyes locking onto him as he approached. They chirped softly, a sound that almost resembled gratitude. Taran dropped to one knee, exhaustion finally catching up to him. "You're safe now," he said, his voice hoarse. "But we need to move." Before he could gather his strength, a low growl rumbled behind him. Taran whipped around, gripping a jagged stone he had picked up earlier. Emerging from the shadows was another Varkash, its shimmering carapace glinting in the pale moonlight. This one was smaller but no less deadly. Taran's heart sank. His body screamed for rest. His arm throbbed where a branch had torn through his jacket, and he had no real weapons left. But there was no time to think. The predator advanced, its movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring the hunt. He glanced back at the younglings. They pressed themselves further into the crevice, trembling but silent. Taran gritted his teeth, stepping into the open. "Come on," he growled, raising his makeshift weapon. "Let's see what you've got." The Varash lunged, its claws swiping low. Taran dodged to the side, slamming the stone into its flank. The blow barely made the creature flinch. It rounded on him with a snarl, its antennae twitching as it prepared another strike. Just as it pounced, the ground beneath them trembled. The jungle itself seemed to roar, vines snapping and roots breaking as a massive form emerged from the shadows. It was the larger predator from earlier. Its jagged, moss-covered body loomed over both Taran and the Varash. The smaller predator froze, its antennae flattening in submission. The larger beast growled low, its glowing yellow eyes narrowing on the Varash. In one swift motion, it lunged, grabbing the smaller predator in its massive jaws and dragging it into the darkness. Taran didn't wait to see the outcome. He turned back to the younglings, his voice steady despite the shaking in his legs. "Let's go, now." The Avari chirped softly, following him as he led them toward the jungle's edge. The bioluminescent plants began to glow brighter, as though lighting their path. By the time they reached the clearing where his escape pod had landed, Taran could barely stand. He activated the pod's beacon, sending a signal to the Ecliptica. As the pod's doors hissed open, the younglings hesitated, looking up at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "It's okay," he said, motioning for them to enter. "You're safe now." One by one, the Avari climbed inside, their scales shimmering under the pod's lights. Taran collapsed against a nearby tree, his body heavy with exhaustion, but his heart lighter than it had been in days. Above, the roar of a shuttle broke through the jungle's eerie silence. The Ecliptica was coming for them. As the pod doors closed, Taran allowed himself a faint smile. He had come to Tyrius 4 for answers, but left with something far more important. A reminder that even in the darkest, most dangerous places, the fight to protect life was always worth it.